The great state of Missouri and the Biden administration are clashing heads on the Second Amendment. Welcome to another installment of Connecticut Gun Bench. Today's video is brought to you by P.A.N. Firearms, LLC. P.A.N. Firearms for your NRA certification and multifaceted gun training. You can reach us at 203-300-6343 or use our website, www.panfirearmsllc.com. As always, there'll be a link in the description box below. But let's talk about this. The Biden administration is taking the state of Missouri into court over Missouri's law.
They cannot ignore federal gun laws. Our Missouri Capitol reporter Emily Manley joins us live with how the governor and the attorney general say they're going to fight tooth and nail to protect Missourians' Second Amendment rights. Emily.
Well, that's right, Sandy. The United States Justice Department sent this 7-page letter to Governor Mike Parson and Attorney General Eric Schmitt Wednesday, warning them of the relationship that's on the line by these federal gun laws being invalid in Missouri. Well, the two sent a response today back to the department, and they said that they're not going to sit there and watch the federal government tell Missourians how to live their lives. Earlier this week, Governor Mike Parson signed the Second Amendment Preservation Act. The law prohibits law enforcement officers in Missouri from enforcing federal gun laws.
This law doesn't impact federal law enforcement. It does impact our state enforcement.
Republican Representative Jared Taylor sponsored the bill that also fines police departments up to $50,000 if an officer violates someone's Second Amendment rights.
I just found that pretty hysterical, that they seemed offended that we would do this and that we're not going to help them.
The justice wants clarification of the new law that would protect Missourians from enforcing ghost guns and red flag laws. The 7-page letter mentioned the murder rates in Missouri, reading, measures that impair the effective enforcement of federal law will increase the risk of violent crime in our communities. It then states a state cannot nullify federal law. Taylor says it doesn't, since the federal government can still enforce the laws.
We're not going to help you enforce your unconstitutional gun laws. That's the point of this bill. And by us not helping participate, it's going to be pretty hard to do it in the state of Missouri.
The DOJ letter says Missouri also receives ample federal grants and assistance for law enforcement.
Missourians want to make sure that our Second Amendment rights are protected. And if that means losing a little bit of federal aid as far as money goes, I think that we're willing to do that.
Now, in the letter that Parson and Schmitt sent back to the DOJ today, they said that Missouri is not nullifying gun laws. Instead, they're protecting Missourians from overreach of the federal government and the right to keep and bear arms. Representative Taylor told me today that he still expects this legislation to end up in court. Reporting live tonight from Missouri State Capitol Bureau in Jefferson City, I'm Emily Manley, Fox 2 News.
Basically, layman's terms, Missouri created a law that states, it was signed into law in 2021, that basically states that any firearm and or component made in Missouri, sold in Missouri, and stays in Missouri is exempt from federal gun laws. And of course, you know the Biden administration has a huge issue with this. Now, I'm pretty sure it's Missouri back in 2008, 2009, if I'm not mistaken, somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong, flirted with the idea that the same principle, where if they manufactured a firearm in Missouri, it sold it in Missouri, and it stayed in Missouri, that the firearm was exempt from federal law. And they were going as far as to say silencers and machine guns and what have you. If it's created in Missouri, it doesn't leave Missouri, sold in Missouri, federal law is exempt. Of course, that raised a lot of eyebrows, but Missouri has made that law a permanent fixture of Missouri. And this is now going to the U.S. Supreme Court, brought in by, of course, the Biden administration and the DOJ. On this article here, Ammoland Missouri law canceling all federal gun control efforts goes to U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court is tasked with the job of sorting out a case between the DOJ and the state of Missouri regarding House Bill 85. I'll put House Bill 85 in the description box so you can get the details of it. Biden's DOJ doesn't like the idea that the state of Missouri has decided to protect its citizens from an overreaching federal government and unconstitutional laws. HB 85, also known as the Second Amendment Preservation Act, or SAPA, has really gotten under the skin of the Biden administration because it prevents gun grabbers at the federal level from coercing with state officials for gun grabs. The law does not extend to various federal statutes, executive orders, administrative orders, court orders, rules, regulations, or other actions that collect data or restrict or prohibit the manufacture, ownership, or use of firearm accessories, or ammunition exclusively within the borders of Missouri. The federal government's complaint alleges that the restrictions within HB 85 have hindered cooperation and other activities that aid federal, state, and local law enforcement efforts in creating joint federal task forces against Missourians. The legislation, which was signed into law in 2021 and sponsored by Representative Jared Taylor, invalidates federal firearms laws under SAPA. Law enforcement agencies can be fined up to $50,000 if they enforce federal gun regulations. You can imagine how infuriated the gun grabbers would be over something like this. Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General Brian M. Boynton, head of the Justice Department's Civil Division, said, "A state cannot simply declare federal laws invalid. This act makes enforcement of federal firearms laws difficult and strains the important law enforcement partnerships that keep violent criminals off the streets." Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitt said, after the disastrous arguments in the Missouri Supreme Court last week, the Biden Department of Justice has now filed yet another partisan lawsuit that seeks to attack Missourians' Second Amendment rights. Schmitt went on to say that the attempts by the Biden administration to invalidate HB 85 are also an attempt to stop the very successful Safer Streets initiative implemented in 2019. According to Schmitt, the Safer Streets initiative has resulted in the filing of over 650 charges against nearly 390 defendants with a conviction rate of roughly 98%. Quote, "My office has fought to continue the initiative, but this initiative has been suspended solely because of the Biden administration's actions." So it would seem that the Biden administration doesn't like crime prevention unless they are the ones to determine who the criminals are. While Missouri seems very successful in its statewide focus on stopping criminal behavior, the Biden administration seems to be preoccupied with the confiscation of guns at the federal level. HB 85 clearly states, "The people of Missouri have vested the General Assembly with the authority to regulate the manufacture, possession, exchange, and use of firearms within the borders of the state, subject only to the limits imposed by the Amendment 2 of the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Missouri." And then he goes into his little personal opinions, which, well, there it is. That pesky Second Amendment prevents Democrats at the federal level from violating the God-given rights of American citizens in this case. Schmitt went on to say, "Make no mistake, the law is on our side in this case, and I intend to beat the Biden administration in court once again. The Second Amendment is not a privilege, it's your right." This is an article by Dan Wass. I didn't know this guy. So, this is very interesting, because if they lose at the Supreme Court level, two other states, Iowa and Kansas, are kind of flirting with the same idea of creating the same kind of law. And of course, that will really put a hamper on the anti-gun efforts of this, of this administration. But we can watch this very closely and see what happens at the Supreme Court level, as Missouri is obviously putting forward states' rights in this effort. But it's very interesting that they have taken this stance. The state of Missouri, I applaud them for it, because technically, layman's terms, they're right. If it's made in Missouri, sold in Missouri, and stays in Missouri, federal law does not apply. But this is something we have to watch and see where it goes from here. As I said, they went to the Missouri Supreme Court, and Missouri Supreme Court basically said, sorry. Yeah, this is legit and good to go. As I said, I will put the actual law in the description box below so you can read it in its entirety. But as I said, we should watch this very closely. I find this very interesting. And anything to put a thumb in the eye of this administration, they have pretty much proven themselves to be very anti-gun. That we've always known that, especially when it comes to Biden. Even though when he was vice president on Obama, he was right there at the forefront of basically telling good people that what they can or cannot have, as if somehow that's going to curtail crime. Well, anyone with any level of common sense knows that's it's a farce. But let me know what you think. As always, leave your comments in the comment section below. Any statements of violence or statements that will lead to violence will be removed. Please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you'll know when the next video is going to go live. And I will see you on the next one. Peace.